There we go. All right. Well, thank you for coming tonight. I know there's a lot going on with wrap up of City Nature Challenge and other meetings and things going on. So appreciate folks coming. Obviously, this will be recorded so that you can other people can watch it if they can't attend tonight. Hopefully, I'm not wearing you all out on all this. We've still got this session and then one more session, which will be pretty intense because it's going to be well, it's probably going to be broken into two parts because of skippers. There's so many skippers and there's so many open wing and then there's closed wing skippers. So we're probably dividing that into two more sessions. So hopefully you can hang in there. Those should be a real interesting collection of photographs and trying to dissect who's who there. So tonight we're going to finish up the brush-footed butterflies that we started last month during the April training. I do want to start with a pair of pictures of a butterfly that Darlene actually inquired about um, last month, and I had not included that species. So we'll just do that right now. And that is the Mexican fritillary. The Mexican fritillary is really a butterfly of the Rio Grande Valley, but it does occasionally stray north. She actually documented one in the area. So I wanted to at least acknowledge this particular butterfly because it looks a lot like a variegated fritillary. And in fact, when I was in the Rio Grande Valley this winter, this was one of my target species, and it took a long time to find one. But when I did, it became very obvious. This is the actual photograph of the one I got. But the thing to notice about the Mexican fritillary is that this part, all of the hind wing here, is really without any markings. When you look at the variegated fritillary, you can see that it has a lot of lines. It has different colors of orange and brown intermixed, and this is just a kind of an orangish wash. So that's something to keep in mind. The other thing I noticed too, but this is going to be the most obvious thing to watch for on this fairly rare butterfly, but you'll notice up here too, these two spots on the four-wing cell, they're complete, two complete kind of kidney-shaped spots, whereas this one has the large kidney-shaped spot surrounded by black. This one though is only a partial, and that's pretty typical. We only have a partial of a circle right there, so that's another difference. But again, what you're going to be doing is watching for the emptiness of this orange field on the Mexican. But again, of all of the ones you're going to encounter, if you had to separate the two in our area, 99.9% probably, and that's a guess, but it's probably accurate, are going to be variegated fritillaries. So just to keep that in mind. So now what we're going to do tonight is I'm going to start with some butterflies that are in the brushfoot family, but are not real common in our area, but do get encountered in our area. And so I don't want to ignore them. So we're going to start with the white peacock, an absolutely gorgeous butterfly. My lifer white peacock actually, even though this is a butterfly of the lower Rio Grande Valley and the Gulf Coast, lower Gulf Coast for the United States, this is a butterfly that first encountered, believe it or not, in Fredericksburg at the little nature park up there many, many years ago during my first stint in Texas. So that was quite a surprise. And it is a really beautiful butterfly, as you can see here, that has when the wings are open. And this butterfly will a lot of times it kind of divides its time between having perched with its wings folded and perched with the wings open. So these both of these are very possible when you encounter them. But if you'll notice them, they have these dark spots that come across both wings, but each one of them has some orange surrounding it, some pale orange there. They also have orange, especially on the hind wings, but a little bit on the forewings, that orange edging that kind of colors those white cells that you see across here. So that's a fairly distinctive butterfly. And it's medium size, so it's not going to be confused with any other butterfly that we have around here. The only thing by comparison I can think of is a checkered white, and a checkered white is a little bit smaller, brighter white, and has vastly different markings on it. When the wings are folded, you can still see the some of the eye spots. You can still see that there's some orange there. There's orange on the hind wing. There's even orange up here in some of these other areas, these lines on the hind wing as well. So really distinct little butterfly. There have been, according to iNaturalist, there have been more than 80 sightings documented in iNaturalist, primarily October through December. So this is probably a butterfly that spends most of its life in the Lower Oregon Valley, and then in the fall, as do a lot of butterflies from there, they start to migrate north, and that's why they show up here. We have had the one sighting at Guadalupe River State Park. It's actually kind of a funny story. We were all butterflying down by the river, and I said, "Oh, there's a peacock!" And all of a sudden, these kids come running up, going, "Where's the peacock?" And I said, "It's right there." And then I realized, oh, they're looking for like a real peacock, um, the bird peacock, and they walked away rather disappointed, and me disappointed that they were disappointed. But it was kind of funny. Anyway, so this is one, again, you're not going to see it very often, but when you do, it's a striking butterfly. It's definitely worth taking a good hard look at and enjoying it. Another one that we is fairly widespread. It's mostly an East Texas butterfly. However, it's got kind of a weird distribution in our area. It kind of goes from the I-35 corridor, New Braunfels area, kind of stretches all the way out towards Rock Springs. So it's kind of a swath where you get records in iNaturalist there. And then you kind of skip the countryside for a while. And then when you get back out to Fort Davis and that area, you actually start picking them up again. So an interesting distribution on the red-spotted admiral, which I grew up calling the red-spotted purple. Um, but that has now been combined with another butterfly that, for whatever reason, same species. But when you look at the white admiral, it sure doesn't look very similar to this. So, but believe it or not, these two are now the same species. These are just subspecies. The white admiral and the red spotted admiral, or the red spotted purple subspecies, I guess you could say. They're swallowtail size. It's a great big butterfly. Beautiful when its wings are open. It has the red spotting pattern when you see it when the wings are folded. This is a butterfly that I typically associate with wetter areas, with woodland areas. Um, and I have seen it a couple of times at Guadalupe River State Park, but I don't think it's been documented in iNaturalist in the park. But when I did see it, it was always at the bend of the road as you enter day use area, and I remember it twice. Um, but it does look a little bit like a pipevine swallowtail. Again, watch for this one. This is not one. Bear County only has 29 sightings in it, so just so that you know, Kendall County has even less. Kerr County has even less. Comal County has a little bit more because you're getting a little bit further east. But not a lot of sightings around here, but definitely a good one to see when you get the opportunity. Um, and just to kind of show you when I'm talking about the red admiral versus the pipevine swallowtail, again, you'll notice the tails on the pipevine, the lack of tails on the red spotted admiral. The other thing is the spot pattern here along the marginal submarginal band right here is a little bit different than this one here. These are a little bit more regular. You can even see a little hint of the orange that you will see on the underside of the red spotted admiral that is lacking on the pipevine swallowtail. But when they're flying around, and this is a strong flyer, just like the pipevine is, I always try to kind of look, and if I see a little bit different pattern of blue in the wing, I'm going to try to look to see if I can see any tails on that butterfly. You just never know, but it's definitely one that we want to keep an eye open for. Okay, so moving on. So that's a couple of ones that we don't see a lot of on our butterfly surveys locally, and certainly not at the park. Another one that we actually have never documented at the park, and remember, I worked there for 9 years and never saw a viceroy at Guadalupe River State Park, but over here at Cibolo Nature Center, I see them. Um, this is the classic monarch look-alike butterfly. It is smaller, always smaller than the monarchs. So it's kind of a medium-sized butterfly, and the distinguishing mark that's going to separate, and of course we'll do the comparison photographs, but you'll notice this black line that goes through, whether the wing is folded like here or open, you see the black line that cuts right through the middle of the hind wing, each hind wing. So that mark is very distinctive and separates those two out quite nicely. And so this is a butterfly that I usually see associated with willows, which is the host plant. So here in the Bernie area, I'll see it along the creek, Cibolo Creek that flows through town. I'll see it at the Cibolo Nature Center because there are willow trees there where primarily lays its eggs. So that's kind of the limiting factor on this particular butterfly in terms of where you're going to find it. There's probably 2 to 3 generations that we have throughout the year here in this part of Texas. So keep an eye open for this one, especially as you're walking along any of those doing surveys around river areas or water areas that have willow trees. It would not be in the middle of the summer unusual to see this orange and black butterfly. Here's the comparison photographs between the viceroy and the monarch, this being the male with the glands right there and there. But this one, again, you see the line going through the hind wings, the lack of that right here. It has that thumb kind of margin right here. And also notice that this one is a little bit paler, not quite as deep orange as you see with the monarch. And the size looks the same, but they are different because of that when they're in real life. The other thing you'll notice here is this almost cuts off right here, whereas this kind of rounds off, and you have these 4 distinct purple line or orange lines, whereas here it's kind of folded into this area here. So a little bit different presentation on the wingtips of the viceroy and the monarch as well. And then again, if we show the wings closed, again, there's a lot of similarity. Dark hind wing on the underside, dark hind wing on the underside, pale orange out here on the wingtip, pale orange out on the wingtip here. But then again, you have the black line of the viceroy cutting through the hind wing, whereas you don't have it. Here's the clear mitten that you kind of see on the wing, the underside of the wing of the monarch. So easy to tell a difference if you keep in mind that you're looking for that black line, a smaller size for this butterfly, and time of year. So this is a butterfly that's going to come out late spring. This is a butterfly that's going to come out. We're going to see in early spring, and then it's going to disappear for most of us, not all, but most of us, for several months when this one might be present, and then this one will appear late in the year. So keep that in mind as you're watching those orange and black butterflies. Now, another butterfly that is absolutely gorgeous. This is one of the prettiest butterflies that I've seen, certainly in this part of Texas. Really dramatic colors. I actually photographed. This guy was photographed at Bernie City Lake with wings closed. You'll notice with the wings open, it has the orange spot here and an orange spot here. You'll notice a lot of variation. This is probably an older individual versus a younger individual. And then here's the orange spot even on this one with all of the patterning underneath here, just absolutely gorgeous. You have the white bar, spot bar that goes through both wings on all of these butterflies, even on the hind wing, you can see the white barring that goes on there. This is called the Arizona Sister. This is a butterfly that hangs around oak trees. It is going to be most likely encountered, pardon me, certainly when I've encountered them. Most of them have been out in either the Big Bend area, Seminole Canyon area, Fort Davis area. They're more of a West Texas butterfly. However, that said, at the park in 2017, I actually saw them in March, June, and October. So for whatever reason, that particular year, they showed up at Guadalupe River State Park. I never got a picture because they're fast, strong flyers. I would see them land on the ground. By the time I got my camera ready to go, the thing would take off again. Unfortunately, I never documented an iNaturalist on this here. I've also seen them. I may have been. It was actually earlier than that. I've seen them at Waring in the Waring area. They were there one year, and that was the first time I lived in Texas. So that would have been probably 2010, 2011 that I was able to record them out in the Waring area. So that was again another surprise. Didn't get photographs, so maybe nobody believes me. But anyway, it's going to be a very uncommon encounter that we're going to ever see these guys. There are 6 records in Bexar County in iNaturalist. In Bexar County, according to iNaturalist, it's not been seen since 2000, or recorded, documented since 2019. So again, not a common butterfly, but when you're doing surveys, especially as you go farther west from the San Antonio area, don't be surprised if you encounter one of these. I know some of you may help with the Love Creek butterfly count, or they're starting one now at Lost Maples. Who knows? You just never know. But keep your eyes open for it. It's a stunning butterfly, and this is again another one you will remember. Another butterfly that's kind of a beautiful, but I think beautiful butterfly in kind of a muted way is the common mestra. This is a tropical species. It's fairly small. That flower, the one that the butterfly is on the left, is a um, cup plant, and that cup plant flower, for any of you that are not, I'm sorry, not cup plant. I'm getting all the way up in the tall grass prairie. Let's call that cowpen daisy. You know what a cowpen daisy flower looks like size wise. Well, that'll give you an idea of how big this butterfly is. It has a lot of orange and white. It's very distinct with the brown edging here, but the orange edging on the hind wings is unlike any of the butterflies that we see around here that have white in it, or any other butterfly for that matter. And then what's really striking is that when the wings are folded, when it's perched, which it'll often perch on leaves or directly on the ground, is a lot of white and orange in the pattern here. It's actually more patterned underneath the wings than it is on the top of the wings. Interestingly enough, this butterfly prefers to lay its eggs on nose burn, which is a really irritating plant if you've ever touched it or stepped on it. Um, the butterfly itself has a very slow fluttering flight, usually close to the ground. It will glide and then it'll flutter. Um, and some years we get lots of these butterflies in the area for whatever reason. And then if we get a bunch of them in late summer into the fall, we'll usually have them through the next year. And then for whatever reason, they kind of fade out. It may just be weather related. It's because they're tropical. A cold winter may really put the hammer on these butterflies and knock them down. And then they have to slowly repopulate the area the following year when we get better weather and enough rainfall. So keep that in mind. This is not a butterfly you're going to see every year, but when you do see it, you can see it in pretty good numbers. So take advantage of that when that happens. But there is no other way that you're going to confuse this butterfly, I don't think, with anything else we have around here. I see it a lot of times along woodland edges and in woodland areas. So watch for them along those areas, in those areas when we see this little fella. Okay, now we're going to get back to some brown butterflies because why not? The first one we're going to take a look at is the goatweed leafwing. Um, and it is a strikingly well patterned, well camouflaged butterfly. And when I say strikingly, meaning when it's sitting on a branch, it can be impossible to see unless you saw it land there. It is a very plain undercarriage, if you will, very kind of brownish with some little hints of a little bit of orange, but really no distinct markings on any of these three photos. You can see a little spot here and this little mark here, but really it's quite variable. So some of them look to have it and some of them don't. One of the things I always notice about this butterfly, though, it does have very prominent veins on the underside of the wings. Especially in this photograph, you can even see it in here. This one is not quite as good, but it's a little out of focus as well. But it's characterized by having a falcate forewing tip, which you can see in all of these photographs here. And then it comes straight down into the hind wing. The hind wing has a tail right there. And then the rest of the hind wing is pretty much flat. There is a little bit of a raise right here and a little bit of a raised edge right here on the tip, but generally fairly flat. If you look all three of these, there's not really a lot of characteristic there other than that one little hint of a little tip right there. When the wings are open, which isn't happen very often. I apologize for this picture. It's the only one I could find with the wings open. This one looks like it had a hangover or something, or it certainly was sunning itself. When their wings are open, the few times you get to see it, or even when they're flying by, you'll see they're bright orange and very few markings on the upper wings. So when you see a kind of a medium to large size butterfly fly by, strong flight, they go up into the treetops readily, but then they're also on the ground where they feed on droppings. They feed a lot on sap coming out of leaking out of tree trunks. Occasionally they'll feed on flowers, but not very often. You see, I've got one lucky shot of one on a frostweed once, but most of my photographs are either on the ground or on a tree like this. But again, bright orange upper side, very, very muted, well camouflaged underside. So quite a contrast between the wings, and that helps you actually identify it in flight because you see the dark, you see the brown, and then you see the bright orange, the brown, the bright orange, the brown, the bright orange, and that can help you lead to your identification. And again, because they like to perch up in trees on branches and places like that. Now, I will say the question mark, and we're going to compare those two in just a moment. The question mark can do the same thing, but they have more black markings on the wing, on the upper side of the wing. So the orange on their upper side of the wings isn't quite as dramatic as this shiny, bright patch of orange, and it flashes you when it flies by. So we'll compare those two just to look at them. And here they are right here. So here's the goatweed leafwing over here, falcate tip to the wing. Again, you can see the tail coming all the way down. Now the question mark, if we just ignore this right now, but if we look at the wingtip, instead of being just sharply pointed like it is up here, it kind of comes up, squares off, and then comes to a point. So you can see there's quite a bit of difference in how these wingtips are actually structured. And then it comes down. It does have a tail. This particular picture, the tail's kind of worn off, so it's got a little bit of a tail. Um, and then this is all beat up. So, but it's generally, there's not a whole lot of pattern right here. This is often called an angle wing. Sometimes you can call this an angle wing too, but they have more of look like kids with scissors went along the edge and cut them crooked. The other thing, of course, that's really when the wings are folded that are distinguishable is, of course, the question mark, the little comma shape, silver comma with the little silver dot that you see right there on the question mark. Some of you may be wondering about the comma, and I think I mentioned it, but just in case, as a review, the commas are more northeast Texas, and the comma would have this comma, but it would lack this little spot right here. They're also just a little bit smaller, but again, there are no records of commas in our area, so I'm not including that in this particular presentation. Here are the wings open on the question mark and the leaf wing open. Again, here's on the question mark, has those black markings. The orange isn't quite as dramatic on the butterfly. They're similar in size, not much difference in size. But again, you can see the squared off tip with a little flare. This one just goes straight to that falcate or pointed tip. So again, those two can be a little bit confusing. So you just want to look at them and study them a little bit. And again, really keep an eye when they're flying around. You think you might have either one of these. Try not to lose it up in the trees, and you might be able to get a positive ID on them. Now, I did want to include the tropical leafwing. Tropical leafwing, as its name suggests, it is a butterfly of the South, South Mexico and Rio Grande Valley. But that said, it has a lot of records, not a lot, but a few records in our area, especially up around San Marcos. These photographs I actually took during a BioBlitz I think it was 2 years ago when the Master Naturals meeting was held in San Marcos, and we went out and did a BioBlitz at a little county park and found a whole tree full of these, all feeding on sap of this tree. And at first, I just thought they were goatweed leafwings, and I got to looking at them, and what I noticed were these right here and right here. You can see another one right here. Notice you've got the tail, you've got the falcate tip on the forewing, you've got the tail, and then it comes down. It forms a very distinctive tail here, and then another one right here on all of these. And this is so it's not smooth like the goatweed, and it can be easily overlooked. I mean, it doesn't have a lot of markings here. Maybe a few more hints of markings than the goatweed, as we'll look at. And when the wings are open, there's more markings on the open wings, as I'll show you in a second here, a few seconds. But again, this is the tropical leafweed. Leafwing. It can get as far north as San Marcos or even farther north. It doesn't have a lot of sightings. We have one sighting at Guadalupe River State Park, and the only reason is that I ran it over. I hit it. I was just coming into the park. An orange butterfly flew in front of my car. I hit the grill. I stopped, got out, and here's what I found. Unfortunately, this dead butterfly. And then when I started noticing this pattern right here, I thought, well, that's not a tropical or goatweed leafwing. That's way different. And then I saw these little flanges right here and here, and took it and got a field guide opened up, and sure enough, it was a tropical leafwing. So unfortunately, the only record we have in iNaturalist or anywhere else is this dead specimen, which, by the way, at least when I worked there, was in a container on display so that people could see it. So it didn't go to waste, but it was too bad that was the one that I saw at the park. So, but definitely a neat little butterfly. And so, with the few occasions you do see goatweed leafwings, it's worth taking a look at the um, end of the hind wing and see if it's got a smooth, if it's smooth after the tail, or if it's got a couple more tails. And what this reminds me of, you remember when we were kids and you wanted to draw water, you kind of drew a series of things like this. That's what this reminds me of. And so it's worth looking for because it may be more common than we've given it credit for. So that's why I wanted to point it out to you. All right, so now let's compare the goatweed with the tropical. Again, I've, I've really hit this pretty hard, so it should be pretty obvious by now. But again, you've got the pattern. You've got barely a little hint of a little a tooth right there, but down here you've got some prominent teeth, more distinctive that you see on these two butterflies. So shouldn't be that hard to tell apart, but we have to keep in the back of the mind that the tropical could actually occur in our area, even though it is going to be mostly uncommon. All right, a few more brownish butterflies. We're going to get into the emperors. I'm going to start with the most commonly documented emperor in the state of Texas in iNaturalist, over 17,000 records. And yet in Guadalupe River State Park, where we do our surveys, it's actually less common than the tawny emperor for whatever reason. And we'll get into that in just a moment. But this is the hackberry emperor. The thing to notice that right off the bat, when you see this kind of butterfly with brownish orange, lots of eye spots, especially when the wings are folded over on the right, as you see on the right, lots of eye spots. The eye spots here aren't quite as dramatic, but they're definitely present. But what you're looking for is on their little epaulets or a little shoulder, if you will, of the forewing. There are two, within this cell, there are two darkish bars. The outer bar is solid. The inner bar is actually split. You can see it here a little bit. It almost looks like it's connected, but it's actually broken. And this one is clearly broken when the wings are folded. So that mark right there distinguishes this butterfly alone. That mark alone distinguishes it from the other two emperors that I'm going to show you. Um, it does overwinter as a caterpillar, so it takes a little time to get them flying around in the springtime, but by now they should be flying around, mating and laying eggs for their first generation of the second generation, I guess, of the new year, technically. But that pattern right there is what's going to separate this butterfly from the other two. The next one I want to show you, and again, remember, it's solid, broken right here in this cell, this four-wing cell. The next one we're going to look at is the Empress Lilia, same genus. Oh, by the way, hackberry emperor feeds on hackberries. This one also feeds on hackberries, but it's generally the spiny hackberry, and we don't have a lot of spiny hackberry in our area. So we have not um, this has not been documented in Guadalupe River State Park. However, in Bexar County, we've got 350 plus documented records. Where I photograph this most often is actually at Mitchell Lake Audubon. And one of the things that they do a lot of out there is they perch right on the ground, right in the middle of the road. So you're going to see them quite commonly, as do tawny emperors at Mitchell Lake. So if you're doing butterfly surveys down in that part, South San Antonio area, Bexar County, watch for these brown butterflies with the little yellowish tips on their antenna, literally resting on the road quite often. Now, with this particular butterfly, when we look at that cell area, it does have eye spots. Again, eye spots very similar to the hackberry emperor. Again, you can see the black spots here on either wing when its wings are open. But the two dark bars on the in the forewing cell are actually solid. They're thick and they are complete. They're not split. So it's dark, orange, dark on both of these wings. They're also noticeably thick, and that's why I'm mentioning that, because that's going to come in handy with the when we separate it from the tawny emperor. So keep that in mind. So that is there. It's real obvious here. It's not as obvious here because the wing was a little bit pulled in, but we'll show you another picture of this where it's more obvious here in just a moment. So this is a butterfly. Again, you're going to find them in Bexar County, especially towards the south. You can find there've been 5 records in the Comal County area, none in Kerr County, and very little in. I'm going to move something here just a second. Only 1 record in Kendall County in iNaturalist thus far. So it's a butterfly worth keeping an eye open. And as things warm, this butterfly may become more common in our immediate area. But right now, not a lot of evidence for it. The third of the emperors that we're going to take a look at is this beauty right here. This is called the tawny emperor. It is also a host plant on hackberries. The one thing about this butterfly that might separate in terms of distribution a little bit is the tawny emperor tends to apparently lay its eggs on more mature hackberry trees than young hackberry trees. And I don't know if that keeps them separated a little bit or not, but if you have a lot of really big, large hackberries, apparently this butterfly tends to be a little bit more common. It again has more observations at Guadalupe River State Park than the hackberry emperor. There are big hackberries at Guadalupe, so it doesn't make a lot of sense to me. But it does have more than 14,000, almost 15,000 observations in iNaturalist. So it's the second most common emperor in the state of Texas, according to iNaturalist. So when you look at this one, this has eye spots on the hind wing, okay? And it has wing. You can see them clearly there when the wings are open. Notice it has more of a tawny appearance, more of an orangey brown to the wings. Really a quite beautiful, striking butterfly, I think. It also, when you look at the spots, or you look at the 2 bars, let me back up one so I don't distract you here. When we look at the bars, you can see that they are also complete here on the forewing cell. You can see that over here as well. Notice that they're not quite as thick, and that may be a degree of how your eyeball sees thick and thin, but I use that pretty regularly. But the real key, so complete right here. So again, if you took the 3 species, hackberry, one of the stripes is split. The other 2 species, they're both solid. The real key to identifying this guy is to notice that there are no eye spots on the forewing. So you got eye spots down here, you got eye spots here, but no eye spots on the forewing, whether the wings are open or closed. That will separate the tawny emperor along with this primary characteristic. Those 2 characteristics separate the tawny from the other 2. So let's compare all 3 of them now side by side. When we look at them, we have the hackberry over here. Again, eye spots here on both the forewing and the hind wing. The Empress Lilia, eye spots here on both wings. The tawny emperor, eye spots on the hind wing, no eye spots on the forewing. And then when we take a look at the bars in the forewing cell, you'll notice that again, it doesn't have this one is split. See how it has a split right there. These 2 are very much solid here and here, and also here and here. And again, this one is talking about the eye spots again. Eye spot, lack of eye spots. Okay, hopefully I beat that into your head now. When the wings are folded, as they can be with all 3 of these butterflies from time to time, when we start looking at the bars on the forewing cell, really on the hackberry, you can really see the split on this one really well. It won't always be that way, but it's definitely split there. This one, these are solid, and notice how thick they are compared to these being a little bit more thin. That's where I get it, and that's relative until you see all 3 species and really see them enough. It's not something that the thickness of those bars may not stand out, but eventually you'll kind of start noticing that. The second characteristic, of course, is the eye spot, where you have no eye spots on the forewing. And you have eye spots on the hackberry, you have eye spots on the forewing of the Empress Lilia. So those are the way to tell those three apart. Again, where we do our surveys at Guadalupe, the hackberry and the tawny emperor are going to be the most likely, with the tawny emperor right now having more observations than the hackberry, and the Empress Lilia, we have not recorded there at the park. So anyway, those are the three spotted emperors that we're going to see in our particular area. So now let's move to another brown butterfly that has a little bit of orange and white in it. The American snout. And of course, the snout gets its name because of this right here. It has these snout-like palpi, which are part of the whole mouth structure of it. I will tell you that that sometimes gets broken off. So if you see a snout, they don't always have a snout. I always called this the Jimmy Durante butterfly. Now I'm aging myself, but Jimmy Durante was a comedian actor 1,000 years ago and had just a big old nose on him. And he was very, very well known for that facial characteristic of his, and great actor. Um, so when the wings are folded and it's at rest, this butterfly looks just like a twig. So it can be very well camouflaged. It can also flash that orange that you see on the inner part of both the hind wing and the forewing, and then it becomes a little bit more obvious, but it can be well camouflaged and difficult to see. It's a small butterfly. You'll notice that it has kind of a squared off wingtip, which is a little bit different. Here you can see it here where you can see the whole wing, but it has a squared off wing right there, and then it kind of dips in and goes like that. You can see that pretty well on this particular one as well. You do see the orange when the wings are open. It's small, as I mentioned. This is a butterfly that we have in our area in some numbers. It seems like most of the year. The farther south you go into Bear County, the more common it is. It likes hackberries, and down in at Mitchell Lake, it loves the spiny hackberries that grow there, and it'll literally be clouds of them some years all over the spiny hackberries down there. This is a butterfly that is it's the most common in West Texas. And each August, when they get their rainy season out there, if they do get it, oftentimes the spiny hackberries will drop its leaves when it's dry, will have a resurgence of leaves. These guys have laid eggs. They will then go and start eating the leaves. They'll pupate very quickly and to the point where the males often emerge before the females. And it's been recorded that the males will actually attack the female chrysalises trying to mate with it. There'll be a lot of mating, and then for whatever reason, mostly males make an immigration or a migration from West Texas through our area all the way to the Gulf Coast. And nobody knows why it's mostly males, but obviously a few females show up, because the females then they start laying eggs here in August, September into October, and we can get clouds of them. This is the butterfly that sometimes people will confuse with the monarch. I know it's hard to believe, really, if you study butterflies much, but it will. In fact, Darlene Varga one time called me and said, "You need to call the news networks." And I said, "What's that?" And this was August, I think late August, when they were making their migration. There was going to be a TV live report or something about millions and millions of monarchs being hit by cars as they were migrating. And it turns out they were snouts, because we happen to have a massive migration. And the numbers of these guys that can migrate in the fall can literally be in the hundreds of millions. Um, and I say that confidently because one year when they were migrating, I went out on a daily basis on a north-south road, picked kind of a imaginary a measured block, and I just counted butterflies per 1 minute every 5 minutes as they were passing through that imaginary square. And the numbers I calculated were just not to be believed. And they were doing that from basically Burnett all the way down to the Gulf, or down to the Rio Grande Valley. So if you can imagine, just in one thing, I was counting millions, and then you factor that in for all those miles, and all of a sudden the numbers are astronomical. And when they do make that fall migration, by the way, oftentimes the large orange sulfurs and the cloudless sulfurs and the lyside sulfurs will make a similar fall migration. Oftentimes you'll see them mixed in with clouds of the snouts as they're moving through. but a neat little butterfly to say the least. All right, continuing our theme of orange and black butterflies, we can't, when we go to talk about the milkweed butterflies, we cannot pass up the monarch. You all know about monarchs, that you know that they migrate through Texas both in the spring and the fall. This is a fall migrating monarch coming through. This is a spring one that actually survived the fall migration, came back from Mexico into the spring, and was missing a whole lot of wing, but it was still eating and still trying to do its thing. And this was, I believe, in April, believe it or not. So they can live upwards of 9 months, that last generation of the year. With the monarch, again, you can tell the female from the male by looking at this mitten part of the wing. You can see here on the male, or actually below it, the male has these two little black glands. The female lacks that, and the veins on the female are a lot thicker compared to the male monarch. Now the color here, this is, don't use the orange color difference here to tell male or female. It just happens to be age of the butterfly for the lighting, one of the two. This one, by the way, is a male. You can actually tell even when the wings are folded because there's this little raised area here and there's a little bit of orange right there. You have to look pretty close, but you can actually tell a male when the wings are folded for the most part. So again, spring, fall, primarily. Summertime, much less common and less. People have been planting tropical milkweed in particular that will keep them around for the year. That you see that on the Gulf Coast, you see it in the Rio Grande Valley. The San Antonio Botanical Garden apparently has got quite a bit of tropical milkweed and has a population of them there, from what I've been told. Very controversial plant. I will not get into it right now. So, but anyway, on native milkweeds, if there was only native milkweeds, we'd see very few of these during the summer months in our area. And if people weren't raising them and releasing them at the wrong time of the year as well. Then we have the queen. The queen is another orange and black butterfly with white spots. The queen, when the wings are open, is very clean orange, dark, deep orange, the black edging with the white spots. Notice that the white spots in the wing, the forewing, are not surrounded by black. And that's a key important thing to keep in mind, is if we go back, the black spots on a monarch are all surrounded by black, all of them, okay? So keep that in mind. Oops, I went back too far. So and these spots are out kind of in the center of the forewing as well. When the wings are folded, you can still see those white spots that are not surrounded by black. So that's again another characteristic of this butterfly. Another thing you'll notice on the veins, they're very thick veins. Happens to be a male. You can see the gland right there. They are trimmed out in white most of the time. So that is another marker. These are a little bit smaller than monarchs, but unless you had them side by side, you might not even notice that, but it's something to keep an eye on. The third milkweed butterfly we have in Texas is this guy, the soldier. This is mostly Rio Grande Valley, but in the fall, it seems like every year now I find one or two in my garden, typically feeding on either Crucita or Shrubby Boneset. We've recorded them a few times at the park, not very many. You have to look really closely at this one when the wings are folded. You'll notice here's the black veins with the white, but there just tends to be a little bit more white, almost like it's a little comma of white, very faint there. A little more obvious on this one, but again, with the lighting, you can see these kind of whitish patches here. That's going to help you identify it. But the real kicker to identifying this guy is to look when the wings are open. When the wings are open, notice there's only two large white spots here on the forewing, and they're lacking all the way through this part of the wing. And that really signifies that you've got a soldier on your hands. Again, fairly uncommon, not fairly uncommon, very uncommon, with occasional sightings in the late fall into even into early, November and possibly into December. Once they get here, they're here. So, but they don't seem to reproduce here. So if we look at all three of them for comparison, again, the monarch is very obvious with the veining that is very prominent in both wings when the wings are open. The white spots on the queen extend all the way through the forewing. With the white spots on the soldier stop right here and don't continue down through the rest of the forewing. Other than that, these two look very similar when the wings are folded or open, so keep that in mind. When the wings are closed, you can see that the first thing to notice about this is that the monarch always has a paler orange, almost yellow hind wing, which is vastly different than these guys over here. So that will separate that from these two very quickly. In terms of the queen and the soldier, again, even when the wings are folded, you can see white spots coming all the way down to where the wing runs into the hind wing. Here you've got the white spots up here, but nothing in these two cells right here. And then a little bit more white here than the white here. That seems to stretch all the way out to the edge, where this is a little bit more concentrated in here. So keep that in mind. These two can be seen. This is obviously our most common one in the summertime surveys. This is the rarest one in the fall surveys, and this one is varying depending on where you are and how the monarchs migrate in a given year. They might be abundant in the spring and the fall. They might be rare. It really depends in part on how the wind blows, believe it or not. All right, the last group we're going to focus on tonight are the satyrs or satyrs, whichever way you want to say it. They're medium to brown, small butterflies, medium to small brown butterflies. A lot of them have beautiful eye spots of varying size and numbers. Flight is typically kind of a lazy flight, just kind of like, it looks like they're going to fall I always think they're going to fall right out of the sky or land. And yet they'll do that for, 50 feet, 100 feet, thinking you're going to get a picture. And then they just keep flopping around out there close to the ground. They are mostly woodland or woodland edge species. Just occasionally you'll see them out in the sunny areas, but a lot of times it's closer to woods. Their host plants for our species are all grasses, but for others, they can be sedges in different parts of the country for different species. So those are some of the characteristics of the satyrs. The most common satyr that we have around here, certainly in the springtime, is the little wood satyr. They just completed their initial generation this spring. So they are flying very commonly in our wooded areas mid-March through the majority of April. There are always a few observations into mid-May, but most of them are in that March into April time period. Supposedly there's only one generation of these guys. They overwinter as fourth instars, so they lay their eggs in the spring. They slowly eat the grasses, and then they overwinter as a fourth instar. So in our area, generally, you're only going to see one generation. Now, and if you look at the records, that is primarily true in iNaturalist. It's very rare when you pick up one that is in the fall. They have two big eye spots on each wing. When the wings are open, you can see those eye spots there. Actually, a little hint of one there and one there. So a few more down here on the lower wing when the wings open. Otherwise, very brown and small. When the wings are folded, you can see the prominent, beautiful eye spots right here on the outer edges of the wing. And then these two dark brown bars that you'll see inside the eye spots. You'll notice these are live oak leaves, so that should give you a little idea of how small they are. Again, they can be very common on a spring survey. They're not there when I hike at Cibolo Nature Center on a spring day. It's not in the woodland area. I might see 25 to 30 or more of them flopping around out there on the grass. Very seldom do they actually feed on flowers, but believe it or not, this spring, for the first time, I actually saw one nectaring on flowers. Mostly they're feeding on dung and tree sap. The next species I'm going to show it to you simply because we don't want to overlook the possibility that it could be here. It's mostly East Texas. But that said, these two photographs, this one was actually photographed in the Rio Grande Valley by myself. This one was photographed up kind of northeast of here quite a ways, but both of them a little bit out of range, especially the one on the right. There's no other iNaturalist records in the Rio Grande Valley for this butterfly. I just found this photograph from years ago and posted it, but there are no other records down there of the Carolina satyr. And so you can see there's a little bit of variability in the eye spot pattern. You can either have really tiny, faint, almost faint eye spots here on both wings, or you can have a little bit more distinctive eye spots that you see here, here, and there, and there. But they both have the brown bars that you see on the Littlewood satyr. They are slightly bigger, but not enough for you to be able to tell if one's flying around. Um, they they are not likely to be seen east of I-35 or west of I-35 based on our iNaturalist records. But again, keep your eyes open. You just never know. And just to compare the two, and I'm going to use the one that has the more prominent eye spots here. This eye spot right here is much smaller than the eye spot here on the Littlewood satyr. The color, I don't know that you can do anything with the color simply because this could be an older specimen that's lost a lot of its scaling or scales. So there are some similarities there. So you want to be a little bit careful when you're looking at these, but the vast majority, well more than 99%, maybe 100% in our area, are going to be Littlewood satyrs. But if you're doing surveys in the New Braunfels area over closer to I-35, keep your eyes open. You never know. You just never know. All right, and then I just saw one of these for the first time in a couple of years out at a bird survey out at Bamberger Ranch. Oh, what a beautiful butterfly! This is the red satyr. It gets its name from these orangey red spots, big ones on the forewing and the smaller ones on the hind wing, along with a single eye spot on either of the hind wings, and then a larger one with double white spots here when the wings are open. Most of the time when you see this butterfly, it's going to be over here with the wings folded. But you can see the wing spot, the eye spot pattern here. But notice there's always going to be that little bit of red or orangey red, a sliver of color there, even when the wings are folded. When the wings are open, there's just no other butterfly there's going to be. Um, this can be in areas where the Littlewood satyr is, so you have to keep that in mind. It is a butterfly that it's basically I-35 west across the hill country to West Texas. It extends all the way up into the Panhandle. There are 6 records in INAT for Guadalupe River State Park. I think I have 2, Darlene has 2, and I think Ken Butler has 2. There are 29 observations in iNaturalist from the northwest corner of Bexar County, but not the rest of Bexar County. It has multiple generations, overwinters as a larvae, but most of the time I see this butterfly, it's only in the springtime for whatever reason. I don't know why that is, but it's usually a springtime observation for me. But again, small eye spots, but the reddish orange color pattern will distinguish this. Then we have this little gem right here, literally called the Eastern Gem Satyr. It has no eye spots that you can see here. When I see it, the few times, and again, here's a live oak leaf. You can see how tiny this thing is and how it matches the color here. I've seen this a couple of times at Honey Creek, and in fact, the only time I've seen it is at Honey Creek. I've not seen it in the park, but it has been documented there on rare occasion. It mostly occurs east of 281, so you're not going to get very many records out here, but it's worth watching for. And one of the interesting things that a couple of interesting behaviors that it has. When it lands, it will start walking around a little bit, and it walks very stiffly. It's walking like it's trying to learn how to walk like a baby on its legs, and it's got 4 of them, so it looks like it's struggling to do that. The other thing, some recent research just came out about gem satyrs. And this spot pattern right here is actually been confirmed through research to be mimicking the eye spot pattern of jumping spiders. And if you think about those videos you see of jumping spiders, waving their little pedipalps and that ring of eyes, if you look at that the right way, all of a sudden you start seeing the eyes of jumping spiders, which could potentially be an easy prey for this butterfly. So having that little barring or that little pattern right there, those little gem-like markings may be a way to help kind of stave off potential predators, thinking that that it's actually a spider they're looking at. So pretty cool little butterfly, very uncommon. If you get one, if you're lucky enough to see one, um, count yourself lucky, blessed, because it really is something to see, and it's not very often that you see it. So keep that in mind with this little guy. By the way, this has never been observed feeding on flowers. Nobody's ever observed feeding on flowers. So if you ever see one and it's feeding on flowers, make sure you have a picture to document. Our largest nymph that we have is the common wood nymph, and it's a biggie. This is a large butterfly. The most prominent thing that we have is these two eye spots set in this big yellow patch on the forewings, series of eye spots here. In our area, you can see these beautiful brown lines radiating through all of the wings, and it's really a quite beautiful butterfly. It has, again, a slow, languid flight, but when it's flying, because in our area, those two big yellow patches, one yellow patch on each wing with two eye spots, makes it pretty easy to recognize when it's out there. Um, uh, it will nectar on flowers, not always, but it does, as obviously as these pictures demonstrate here. There is, again, only one generation of this butterfly per year. It does not have any iNaturalist records in Bexar County, if you can believe that. So all of you people that are Bexar County folk, if you ever see one in Bexar County, make sure you document it with a photograph and put it on iNaturalist. There are very few observations. I think, what did I research this out at? We've had 22 observations at Guadalupe River State Park. They overwinter as a first instar. In fact, when the young hatches from the egg, they don't even feed. They just overwinter like that until the springtime. Now I put these four pictures up here because these are all my photographs. And every time I go to another place, whether it's New Hampshire, whether it's Kansas, or whether it's Wyoming, I think I'm getting a new species. And they're all the same exact species, but look at the variation in their patterns. Out in the West, they don't even have the yellow patch here, except for immediately around the eye spots. Here in New Hampshire, it's a much darker butterfly with a much darker orange patch. And up in Kansas and where I grew up in Iowa, it tends to be kind of a combination between this one and this one and this one. It has a faded yellowish patch there with faded yellow around each of the eye spots. So it's kind of taken a little bit from all of these butterflies here, two of the butterflies. So anyway, when you're traveling around and you see a butterfly like this, don't be surprised, don't be fooled. It's probably a common wood nymph. They're extraordinarily variable depending on the part of the country that they are in. All right, it is, I don't even know what time it is. It's 8:02. Look at that, I'm finishing on time. We are done with all of the butterflies up to the skippers. So we are done with tonight. I do want to mention that we have some upcoming surveys. We had to cancel last week's survey because thankfully we got rain. So this Wednesday, if anybody can make it, Wednesday at 11 a.m., we're going to meet at the park for a survey to make up for last Friday's. And then our next one will be Saturday, May 16th at 11 a.m. For those of you that are new or want to join us for the first time, you are more than welcome. If you're just learning, if you're part of the new class, Alamo class, and you're just thinking this is something you want to at least check out, you're welcome to join us. We meet at the park at 11. When you check into the park, tell them you're there for the butterfly survey. You won't be charged. And when you come through the gate, you immediately turn to the right. There's a gravel area, gravel road. It leads to a parking area, and there'll be people standing around the first parking area. And we survey from there. Bring a butterfly guide if you have it, whether it's the fold out one or a field guide. Complete field guide. Bring binoculars if you have them. They come in really handy for getting good up close looks at the butterflies. Bring water. I don't know how warm it's going to be. There is, I think, maybe a chance, of course, of rain on Saturday. Well, I can't go out to the 16th, but Wednesday we should be fine. It's going to be 88, so it's going to be warm, but it's going to be cloudy. So that will have a little impact. But when it's that warm, usually the butterflies are flying. So we usually have a good survey. So after Wednesday, coming up on the 7th, this Wednesday at 11. Then we'll go to May 16th. We have two in June. There are also some NABA, North American Butterfly Association, butterfly counts that are a national thing that are going on. Most of them are been dated in June. You can get more information about that. Ask your folks, your representatives for that. And then the final online trainings or reviews will be Monday, June 1st, 7 p.m. Open wing skippers. I tried to combine these two, but they're almost 15 to 17 or 18 open wing skippers and more than that of closed wing skippers. So to try to do that in one night would put us here for 2.5 hours, and that would be hard for me, let alone y'all. And since I'm retired, I don't have to teach for 2.5 hours if I don't want to. So we're going to do one on June 1st at 7 p.m. on the open wing, and then Monday, July 6th on the closed wing skippers. And again, I want to thank Robert Doyle. He helps coordinate this. He's the one that suggested that we get this with the Alamo chapter, and Jeanette has been fantastic to work with us to set these up for us. They're recording all of these, so you can go back and all the way to the first one and review. And if you're going to be joining any of the butterfly surveys for the NAB accounts, probably not a bad idea to review those. Hopefully they're done well enough that you can actually get something out of that. I'll stop my share right now. So hopefully you're getting some benefit out of these training sessions. And if anybody has any questions, I am happy to try to answer those before we finish. So I'm just scrolling through the comments right now just to see if there are any questions. Saw Red Satyr during CNC at Hill Country State. Yeah, very good, very good. That's great. Tag monarchs at Cibolo and got news at one of our, was caught in February in Mexico. Oh my gosh, that's wonderful. Well done, Cheyenne. Let's see. I remember the massive swarms moving around. Oh, that must have been the snouts. Tawny is that I think the second little stripe on the hackberry has been hacked apart. There you go. That's very good. I like that. That's a good way to remember that, Patsy. I like that one. Let's see, Mitchell Lake, saw them on the golf course bird survey. It was attacked by a big blue butterfly at Harbor or near Oak Grove. I think it was pipeline, but yeah, admirals are more aggressive, but you never know. You never know. The Midwest, Missouri and Illinois. Yes, Nathan, the red spotted purples are very common the farther north and east that you go. So it absolutely is right.